needed a body that represented their views, and they formed the association. So anyway, we're celebrating 100 years this year. As we looked into our archives, a few interesting things. 4 of those companies are still around, so we honored them at our annual meeting in May. That was pretty cool. You know, we evolved in the late 80s from being just, though, an association of manufacturers to an association of employers, and the board did that, I think, for 2 reasons. I wasn't there when that happened, but you know, there's been fewer manufacturers in Massachusetts, and of course that trend has continued, even though it's still a core part of the economy. But also a lot of the work that we did on Beacon Hill, so active on policy issues, whether it be workforce, we're going to talk about today, or tax policy, or energy, or any of those things, really affected any employer, so it made sense that we became more broad-based. So, as you said, today we represent about 5,000 employers, very diverse in terms of the industry makeup, although 30% are in manufacturing, which isn't a surprise given that that's our legacy. So look forward to talking with you about the challenges they all face.
Thank you, Rick. Yeah. JD.
Yeah, thank you, Stan. And I just want to, first of all, acknowledge the fact that you all stuck it out for the entire day. Thank you all for being here. You know, I've been to enough of these and have helped design enough of these to know that the last session is always a challenge. So thank you all for sticking out, for being here. I also will say, I just want to congratulate the Workforce Solutions Group. What a terrific day. A lot of really great conversation. Some really provocative ideas, and I think some great themes that came out of it. For me, you know, this notion of alignment and the supply and demand side and partnerships, you know, it kept coming up today. And my takeaway from today is, how do I incorporate that into the work of the Roundtable? So I think the Roundtable has a role to play. For those of you who don't know, the Roundtable, as has been mentioned, is a public policy organization. We have about 80 members. It's CEOs and senior executives from generally large employers. The mission is to strengthen the state's long-term economic vitality and make this a better place to do business. So we go out, Chris and I go out, and by the way, Chris leads all of the workforce work at the Roundtable. As a member of the workforce knowledge, and thank you, Chris, for a job well done. We go out and talk to our members, Chris and I do, every year, and ask them, okay, if that's the mission and goal, how do we achieve that? And they settled on this very simple premise for economic competitiveness, which is we should invest as a state in our competitive advantages and refocus on our disadvantages. Pretty simple. We then ask them, okay, what are those? And without running through the whole agenda, I will tell you that obviously talent and workforce falls under the competitive advantages, the chief competitive advantage. And when we ask our members what their number 1 priority is, they will say workforce. And then 1A will be transportation. But those are the top couple of issues. So what do we do about it? The interesting thing about the survey that you referenced, Stan, yeah, 2/3 said they couldn't find workers with the right skills. We then asked them, what jobs are you having trouble filling? And 6 out of 10 of those jobs were STEM jobs. So at the Roundtable, we've been focusing a little more in on this STEM issue. So we engage on the STEM Advisory Council, through the Workforce Solutions Group, through the long-term unemployed group that Donna is helping to co-chair with Secretary Walker, the Economic Development Council. And we take what we hear from our members and engage in these different ways and try to move public policy that is responsive both to the supply and the demand side that was talked about today.
Rick, maybe you could follow up with JD on what you hear from your membership.
Yeah, so as part of our 100th anniversary, our board of directors told us, you know, have some celebrations, and we are. And I should acknowledge Donna Capello is the co-chair of our Centennial Committee, and she's done a great job. But also to go out and talk to our members and really better understand the challenges that they face and the things that they think the Commonwealth needs to do to make sure that we're successful for the next 100 years. So last summer and fall, you know, our staff went all over the state to meet with the members of our association, and members and non-members actually alike, to better understand what their concerns about were about doing business in Massachusetts. But we identified 4 things, and we put together this document called the Blueprint for the Next Century. And I'll briefly talk about the 4. The number 1 being was workforce. And it took many forms. It took, we don't find people that come to work with work readiness skills. They don't know things like how to be on time, how to dress, and how to work with others, and kind of those really basic skills. But we heard this for all different types of industries and throughout all of the states. And it really dominated the conversation. So it was the number 1 issue that we heard. The others, which will be good for another day. But cost of doing business, is a challenge here. In particular, healthcare and energy, where we're at the top or near the top for both of those. Government regulation, which takes many forms, and Governor Baker has actually a big initiative around this to look at all 2,100 existing regulations and to determine whether some could be eliminated, streamlined, made easier to comply with, and so that's great. And actually, the 4th one was economic opportunity throughout all of the Commonwealth. We've been fortunate in the greater Boston area, things are booming, and you drive around Boston now and you see all the cranes and the economic activity going on. You get to other parts of the state, and many of you know who are in other parts of the state, it's just not the same. So how do we bring economic opportunity to all regions of the state? So those were the 4. But number 1, as I said, was workforce. And it takes many forms of, needs, and I know we're going to talk a little about some of the possible solutions, but it's an issue that affected every industry, every employer, and as I said, every part of the state.
Maybe we should follow up with the challenges that you both painted and what your recommendations might be, at least in a thumbnail sketch format, of how to address those challenges. JD?
Yeah, I think we see it as a 2-pronged approach, right? So we hear from employers that they're having trouble finding talent now. And so what do we do about that? And there is a whole bunch of work going on, both public policy-wise and through these employer relationships with community colleges and voc techs, to develop a pipeline of workers with the skills they need now, right? So companies will partner with a community college or a voc tech school, help define curriculum, and get folks right into their workplace as soon as they can. You have public policy like the STEM Starter Academy, again at the community college, which is another attempt to try to meet an immediate need. But of course, there's a longer-term need, and there's a long-term pipeline need. I sit on the state's board of early education and care. I don't think there is a more natural scientist or engineer amongst us than a 3-year-old, if you think about it. So, I mean, if you think about how to promote a STEM pipeline, you really have to start at the beginning. So it's a short-term and long-term approach. Frankly, the workforce pipeline begins in preschool and goes up through, as you heard from the secretaries today, through the system. And then where there's a lot of public policy focus now at the far end of the system.
Excellent. Rick?
Yeah, I totally agree with JD in terms of aligning the interests of employers with the voc schools, the community colleges that are in their areas. Again, if you travel around the state, you realize that the types of industries really varies by geographic region, and so the needs, vary. And so we really need the solutions, I think, need to be regional. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach to this. But that's why I always think, we actually have the infrastructure, the workforce investment boards that are in place that were created to bring those regional interests, those stakeholders together, whether it be government, employers, and higher education. And I really do think there's an opportunity there, particularly with the new federal legislation that requires the state to develop a strategic plan that we can look to see whether we can better align those interests between employers and higher ed and government. So, I'm excited about this. I think it's a really interesting time. And, we certainly have a governor and a cabinet that's focused on these issues as a priority. So, I actually think this is a really interesting time for all of us who care about this issue to get involved and make the system work better.
Excellent. The next question, you'll have to bear with me. It's from a little-known institute, Harvard Business School. Last year, they had a report entitled "An Economy Doing Half Its Job." It was written by Michael Porter. He found that investing in job training and education would help U.S. workers reassert their productivity advantage, which he believes could lead to higher wages. And the report poses makes this particular claim. The supply chain for skilled talent is marked by poor information flows, inadequate collaboration, an education system not focused enough on cultivating skills that employers want, and companies that hire in ways that discourage investments in those skills. How willing do you think employers are to provide training to their employees? Does this practice vary by industry sector, and what should we be doing together to change this? So let's start with you, Jay.
Yeah, so very willing, and they're doing it. I will say, I keep referencing this survey that you mentioned at the beginning. So this survey was something that we did with AIM and the Mass Business Alliance for Education about 1.5 years ago now, I think. Mm-hmm. And we surveyed about 400 employers from around the state. And we heard the 2/3 number, we heard this notion about STEM. We also asked them to grade the K-12 public education system. And they graded it generally pretty well. More than half of the responses gave it the system an A or a B. We then asked them, though, to grade it on how it's preparing students for the workforce. And the results were a lot lower. It was sort of the C and D range. So I think what's referenced in your question is the fact that business has to adapt to that, right? So what do you do if you don't feel like you're getting workers ready for the workforce from the K-12 system? What you do is you either do some in-house training, which I think was the focus of your question, and that's happening. You do partnerships with community colleges. You do partnerships with VoTech. You do partnerships with community-based organizations. And you try to figure out a way to make sure you have the pipeline of workers coming in that you need. So the answer is yes. I think they definitely would, and they are doing it now. Rick?